are eligible for this new executive order, they will be able to sleep better tonight, knowing that they have an opportunity.
If you want to move working families forward, I think the choice is clear, and Biden is by far the preferable candidate.
When I see messaging with death imagery, I know that it's part of their attacks to get me to stop doing this work.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. The presidential election now just 20 weeks away. In the first debate, just 8 days from now. President Biden in Delaware today, but expected to head to Camp David tomorrow to begin preparing for that debate in Atlanta, while former President Trump's prep, sources tell us, expected to be more informal. Regardless, new rules have been put in place as organizers at CNN look to not repeat the chaos of prior debates.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
This
Who's
is
on your
so,
list?
right.
Gentlemen, I think
this
we've
is
ended
so
this.
unprecedented.
CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang is at the White House. Weijia, the president is in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, one of his favorite retreats today, enjoying that area of the country, a beautiful part of the country. But he's going to Camp David to start preparing. What are you hearing from your sources, Weijia, about how the president's going to frame this 90 minutes in terms of theme, issues he's focusing on?
Well, Robert, the White House would argue that President Biden prepares every single day for this debate because he is president and he takes questions all the time, although, of course, reporters would like him to do so much more often. But this is going to be a robust preparation led by his former chief of staff, Ron Klain, who has also been his right-hand man for much of his career. And we know that his closest advisors will be huddled with him at Camp David to prepare for this debate. I am told that Cedric Richmond will be there, the current chief of staff, Jeff Zients. We know that Bruce Reed, another trusted advisor, is already with him in Delaware. And so they are going to be mapping out everything that they want to get across as they face Donald Trump. And when it comes to messaging, Robert, I'm told we shouldn't be that surprised because they've really been fine-tuning all the things that they believe they have going that Donald Trump doesn't when it comes to fighting for reproductive rights. They argue when it comes to the economy and building more jobs, when it comes to issues of democracy having to do with January 6th. And so we should expect some of that. But I'm also told that we should expect some surprises as well, because this is such a critical performance for President Biden, not only on the content, but on his physical performance as well. Robert?
Weijia, sources are telling CBS that there are tensions now, as there have been really for the last few months, between the U.S. and Israel. What's the latest? Because while the president might be in Rehoboth, might be preparing for the debate, he still is managing foreign policy. So what's the latest on that front?
Right, and his team certainly is too, Robert. And there was a very high-stakes, high-profile meeting scheduled here in Washington for tomorrow between the U.S. and Israel that included members of the White House, the Pentagon, the State Department, that was canceled after Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, of course, released a video that essentially said that the U.S. was withholding weapons and that he was so alarmed about it. Well, the White House says they know nothing of what Netanyahu is talking about. In fact, the exact quote from the press secretary was that we genuinely don't know. And so after this, the meeting was canceled, although officially the White House says that even though they are frustrated by that statement, that it's not exactly a reason to reschedule this meeting. But we know that our colleague, Margaret Brennan, reports that that meeting was rescheduled out of dismay over these, quote, antics from the Israelis.
Weijia Jiang, thank you for reporting. A beautiful day at the White House for Juneteenth. We appreciate your time. And with 5 months until the presidential election, Americans, you're not surprised, probably, sharply divided. But it's not just federal office holders who are facing a lot of this toxic atmosphere that's out there. There's also harassment, unfortunately, against many local officials. That's increased by 55% over the past 2 years, according to a recent study from Princeton University. CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns joins us. She has been investigating this. Caitlin, tell us about what you have found. We know after 2020 that there was a lot of vitriol directed toward election officials. Has that not only remained, but actually gotten worse, and why?
Yeah, Bob, it's a really good point, and we know that this has been directed towards election officials, but what this study found and what we found through our reporting is that this is now directed towards local officials at various, levels of government. And what's striking here is that, for federal office holders, you expect, unfortunately, harassment and threats. For local offices, things like the school board, county clerks, county commissioners, city managers, people who are really close, intimately close to their communities and help run things like, making sure the water's running and the water's on, right? Or running the school board. Those are positions that used to not be controversial. And now the Princeton study shows an increase in threats and harassment. And we found, too, that this level of harassment is something kind of out of a movie. I mean, one county clerk in Erie found a partial pipe bomb thrown into her house while they were sleeping. A mayor in Texas was sent a noose in the mail. We also were in Nevada, where we focused this story, and there were GPS trackers placed on the cars of a mayor candidate and a county commissioner candidate. This just shows this toxicity that we've kind of become used to here in Washington is reaching basic levers of government across the country.
Well, that's a sweeping assessment about what's going on out there. But tell me about some of the individual stories like Beth Smith.
Yeah, so we spent some time in Washoe County, Nevada. As you know from covering politics, it's such a critical swing county in a critical battleground state. But we talked to Beth Smith. She's a member of the school board. And she says, when she ran for the school board, or when she joined the school board, she was thinking about her kids' classes being overcrowded. She joined for those kinds of reasons. But now she has to have conversations with her kids about, whether they can answer the door when someone knocks. She tells them not to go to the door. She has to talk to them about the threats that she's facing. And there's been particular, harassment geared towards her in particular, coming from a local right-wing activist who has essentially made light of her battle with breast cancer, has detailed her painful divorce in blog posts. And she kind of resembles the kinds of people that we are talking about here. And this kind of politics has really kind of infiltrated Washoe County. And we actually talked to the Republican chair, the chair of the Republican Party there, who said that, this kind of thing is effective and it gets people's attention. And experts we're talking to have been saying that this is what they call lawful but awful. Various sorts of harassment aren't always illegal, but they do have a real impact on the ability for these people to do their work. And we actually saw that in the study, a decrease in willingness to engage with your community.
Let's actually listen to Beth Smith, if we have a moment.
It's not what I signed up for, but it's the situation that we have now, and I won't let it stop me, because that's really the goal, is to stop good people from serving. Because if you can get everybody to step down, then they're able to take over.
Really interesting point she made. Her view is that a lot of this harassment is to have people stop serving, stop volunteering, stop running for local office.
Yeah.
Do you sense, when you are reporting on this front, that many people in the future are just going to opt out? They say too much, not enough security, not enough stability, I'm out.
It's a really important point, Bob, because members of Congress and people in higher office have the infrastructure to deal with security threats and harassment. These local people, they're getting harassed, at the grocery store. The proximity to their constituents is kind of key here. And what's notable about what she said is that this is not going to drive her out. She actually was reelected recently to the board earlier this month. But in this study, 40% of local officials said that they are likely not to run for re-election because of this. So this is having an impact on driving people out of public service. That's the kind of public service that's just fundamental and basic.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, reporting for CBS. Thank you for stopping by. We appreciate it.
I don't think that there's any one individual or frankly, any one speech or any one thing that anyone can do, including Donald Trump or his campaign, that will, hide the fact that he despises my community.
The push for Latino voters, we hear from President Biden's campaign manager as both candidates try to mobilize that voting bloc. You're streaming America Decides. President Biden's campaign manager told CBS News that the president's actions offering legal protections to roughly 500,000 undocumented migrants is a crucial move. Here was some of what Julie Chavez Rodriguez had to say with our political director, Finn Gomez.
Why now? Why not a year ago? Why not a month ago? Why now?
It is a really exciting day for our community, but also to continue to bring forward solutions. As we know, President Biden since day one has really been focused on bringing forward solutions, first through a common sense immigration reform bill that he put forward on day one of his administration. It was a bill that was authored by Congresswoman Linda Sanchez, and I know it's something that she is very proud of, and that he continued to find ways to work with Congress to address this issue, even most recently through the bipartisan legislation that he helped to negotiate. But of course, Donald Trump chose to, tank and encourage Republicans in Congress to vote against. And so the president is staying focused on bringing forward solutions. And this is just, another action that he is able to take to make sure that those U.S. citizens who have spouses who, are unauthorized have the opportunity to be able to keep their families together.
Spouses, and then of course about 50,000 children as well that is expected in this new EO executive order.
Yes, definitely. I appreciate that you also brought up the children because in this moment, it's also a stark reminder of the extremely cruel and chaotic family separation policies that we saw from Donald Trump's administration, where we saw, and I think we can all remember those images of literally crying babies being ripped from their mother's arms. And that is, a very somber reminder for all of us of what the last administration did, the kinds of actions that they took, and what they are professing to do moving forward, which is even more dangerous, more extreme, and more cruel for our community.
Julie, but we are 4.5 months out from the November 5th election. Do you believe this policy will encourage U.S. citizens and mixed status families benefiting from this to vote for the president?
I believe that, it's important that communities really see that the president is fighting for issues that matter to them and to their families. For families who are eligible for this new executive order, they will be able to sleep better tonight, knowing that they have an opportunity to help ensure that they are not separated by cruel policies. They will be able to, maybe hug each other a little bit tighter, knowing that they can remain together as a whole family here in this country as a result of this executive order. Those are the things that matter most. And those are the ways in which President Biden continues to fight for, communities across this country that, really deserve the opportunity that we know is so important in this election.
Yeah, we have seen, Julie, in our polling and other polling that shows that there's been some shifts by Latino voters away from the president. As I mentioned, 4.5 months away. What do you say to people, to critics who say that this is a political move to maintain support among Latino voters, especially in crucial battleground states like Nevada and Arizona?
Well, I'd really, ask them to look at the president's track record on this issue over the last 3 years of our administration. As I mentioned, on day one, he put forward the comprehensive common sense immigration reform bill. Following that, he took actions to expand the Affordable Care Act provisions to DACA recipients. He continued to find ways to ensure that families were reunited, like reuniting deported veterans, people who had served in our military and had unfortunately, been deported. So these are actions that the president has taken since day one of our administration.
Julie, so we are just a few days, honestly, about a little over a week away from the first debate. Can I ask you, how is the president preparing for this debate, and who is playing Donald Trump?
Well, the president, I think, is excited to really be able to show the American people the important choice that we have in front of us this election, and to be able to hold Donald Trump accountable for the extreme policies and positions that he's taken on so many issues like reproductive freedom, so many issues like, immigration, again, as we were just talking about.
Right.
The Donald Trump continues to take even more and more extreme positions, professing to be a dictator on day one. And he'll have to answer for all of those policies and positions on the debate stage next week. And so we look forward to being able to show voters the choice that they have before them.
I know you have to go soon here, Julie, but I just got to ask you, what do you think about the new rules that includes like the mute button, no notes, no audience? Do you think the mute button actually helps or hurts Donald Trump in this?
Well, I believe that what's important is, the American people have an opportunity to be able to hear directly from the candidates and to be able to hear their position on the issues that matter most to them. So I do think it's important that we have, a strong, I think, debate that is fitting for, those that seek to choose to serve in the highest office. And I know that, President Biden really understands that kind of sense of character and that sense of leadership. And you will definitely see that from him on the debate stage next week.
Julie, last question. Marco Rubio is being considered to run as a potential VP contender on the ticket for the Republicans to run with Donald Trump. Do you think a Latino on the ticket like Marco Rubio would help with their efforts to appeal to Latino voters? How would you counter that? And what would be that impact to have a Latino official on the ticket?
Well, I don't think that there's any one individual or frankly, any one speech or any one thing that anyone can do, including Donald Trump or his campaign, that will, hide the fact that he despises my community. He has said so time and time again, and his policies also reflect that position.
Great interview there from Finn Gomez. Russian President Vladimir Putin, meanwhile, and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, they vowed to build a strong front against the United States. Coming up next, a pact that's raising alarms in the West. You're streaming America Decides. Vladimir Putin has arrived in Vietnam. It comes after his state visit to North Korea, where he and Kim Jong-un took significant action to deepen their country's partnership. The leaders signed an agreement pledging mutual aid in the event of, quote, aggression against either of their countries. Both Putin and Kim are describing the pact as a major upgrade of relations between Russia and North Korea. Let's bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tayeb. Imtiaz, thanks for being here. What else can you tell us about this deal?
Hey, Robert. Well, look, neither leader really revealed what was actually in what President Putin called a, quote, breakthrough new agreement with Kim. And he says, although it provides with a number of other things, quote, mutual assistance in the event of, again, what he called aggression faced by one or the other, neither leader of two of the world's most heavily sanctioned nations revealed the exact terms of the agreement, which appears, at the very least, to include a mutual defense pact. They didn't class what aggression meant or what sort of military response that might trigger. But we have to take a few steps back and look at this pact between these two nations, which really started first emerging around 18 months ago when Putin, desperate for artillery for his grinding war in Ukraine, turned to Kim for help. Now, Western intelligence officials are warning that what started as a trickle is now a flood, with Moscow expected to receive around 5 million rounds of ammunition and a vast array of North Korean-made ballistic missiles, while Pyongyang will get food, military aid, and missile technology. Robert.
How might North Korea and Russia's partnership affect the ongoing war in Ukraine? What does it mean to have Putin there meeting with this particular leader?
Yeah, it's fascinating when you really think about it. But what I'm going to do is take you back by a week. And this is when South Korea's defense minister, Shin Won-sik, said that his country detected up to 10,000, Robert, 10,000 shipping containers traveling from North Korea to Russia, which could contain those 5 million artillery shells. Now, again, this was before today's summit. And so Vladimir Putin is no doubt asking for far, far more from Kim. And if confirmed, these deliveries would be a massive boon to Russia in its war of attrition on Ukraine, where both sides, Ukrainian and Russia, have complained of chronic shell famine, which has basically been hampering their ability to strike each other with artillery. Now, in January, the U.S. accused Moscow of using short-range ballistic missiles supplied by North Korea to hit targets in Ukraine. The missiles fired by Russia have a range of about 550 miles, according to U.S. National Security spokesperson John Kirby. Now, Ukrainians later corroborated those claims of North Korean rockets being used against them, saying they've examined the remains of over 20 North Korean missiles fired on their territory. All of which is to say that whatever's been agreed between Kim and Putin is potentially very dangerous for Ukraine.
And finally, Imtiaz, how is the Biden administration going to respond to all of this?
Well, we've heard today from, again, from our U.S. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby, who said that the White House is very concerned about what he's called a deepening cooperation between Russia and North Korea, and that the U.S. would keep supporting Ukraine and other allies in the Indo-Pacific. But anything to do with Russia and North Korea is, of course, concerning for the administration, especially as we're seeing these ties get closer and closer. Still, the two candidates vying for president, as you know, Robert, have very different views on Putin and Kim. So Russia and North Korea might want to wait to see if they get Joe Biden in November, who, of course, has strengthened U.S. alliances in Asia, or a more unpredictable Donald Trump, who reportedly claims he's still in touch with Kim after their 3 meetings during his presidency. So there's a lot of questions over what exactly both Russia and North Korea hope to achieve geopolitically when it comes to the U.S. Robert.
Imtiaz Tayyab, thank you for your reporting. We appreciate it. The family of Paul Whelan slamming the Biden administration, marking 2,000 days since the American businessman was detained in Russia. His twin brother, David, released a statement today saying it does not appear the White House has made, quote, more than one offer to secure Paul's release over the past year and a half. He also said their efforts have become, quote, harder to know due to reduced communication between the Biden administration and his family. Paul Whelan has been imprisoned in Russia on espionage charges since 2018. The White House has said repeatedly Whelan is being wrongfully detained and that officials are working hard to bring him home. Doug Burgum has quickly become former President Trump's, well, one of his busiest surrogates. But what does North Dakota Governor Burgum bring to the Trump campaign as a surrogate, and maybe something else? Our political panel standing by to talk Veep stakes. You're streaming America Decides. Former President Donald Trump not shying away from speculation that North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum is on his VP shortlist. A new report from Axios reveals the Trump campaign believes that North Dakota governor could help close the deal in several swing states. In fact, the report says, quote, the campaign's frequent deployment of Burgum to swing and Democrat-leaning states that the Trump campaign wants to put in play has set Burgum apart from many other contenders who are trying to be Trump's running mate. Let's bring in our political panel, Sophia Kai and Major Garrett. Sophia is a national politics reporter for Axios. Major, of course, is CBS News' chief Washington correspondent. We'll begin with you, Sophia. Axios has had this reporting. Burgum, very well liked in the Trump inner circle, but to what end? Every Trump ally I talk to says Trump loves Burgum. What does that mean based on your reporting, your conversations with your sources?
Look, Bob, Burgum is stable. He's low drama. He's also the governor of a well-run state, and those are the key things that Trump likes about him. Trump also likes that he's very loyal to his wife, and so as one Republican ally put it to me, Burgum thinks his wife is hot. And so, you know, that's what Burgum brings to the table. I think, you know, we've seen that play out in how frequently they've been sending Burgum to states like Nevada, states like North Carolina, but also states like Virginia and Minnesota. Those are Democratic states that the Trump campaign is trying to put in play, it gives you a sense of how they're using someone like Doug Burgum even before they've named a vice president.
Major, when you're talking to your own sources, how do they weigh Burgum? I mean, he's clearly, no one's denying, on record or even off or on background, that Trump likes him a lot.
Yeah, central casting is one thing you hear frequently. Doug Burgum looks like a vice presidential nominee. Trump has said many, many times, and I believe he's more than half serious about this, he wants someone he believes can step into the role should, as he says, the worst happen. Trump instinctively believes a two-term governor fits that bill better than any senator does. So on the leadership and the capability side and the looks side, all of which matter to Trump, Burgum fits. Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita, important voices like Doug Burgum for the reasons you just mentioned. He's stable, reliable, manageable, does not have a political organization, which means he would be dependent on their organizational signals and strategic advice. That's something that matters to both Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles because they know that they have less influence / control over former President Trump. The one thing about Doug Burgum, though, that worries some in the Trump inner circle is, does he do anything to appeal to the Nikki Haley-type Republican who is still on the sidelines? They have internal polling data in many of the swing states that those female voters are not yet sold. And so there's a conversation going on, shouldn't the former president think about someone like Kim Reynolds, Joni Ernst, Katie Britt, or someone who is, or maybe Kristi Noem, a woman who can appeal both visually, rhetorically, and from a policy perspective to those voters who are still on the sideline?
I think that's such an important point. I mean, Burgum could be an overture to a Nikki Haley voter without having to pick Nikki Haley in the sense that he's a traditional Republican. But I hear from some sources that Burgum and others are well like Senator Rubio to this point, too, that he provides social cover for suburban voters to say, well, at least this is someone who seems more like a traditional Republican. But what about Major's point? Are you hearing, is there any dark horse candidate right now who might be a female Republican out there who's on the list? I mean, is Elise Stefanik really in the mix or not?
So her name has been on this list for a while. One of the concerns that I've heard from, Trump's camp and people in his orbit is that maybe Elise Stefanik wants it a little bit too much. She's been very eager to defend Trump in terms of, his legal problems, and Trump likes that. But, Trump also wants somebody who's seen as being able to stand on their own 2 feet. And yeah, I think one of the things that works in Elise Stefanik's favor is that, both in terms of appearance and, in that she is a woman, she may appeal to some of those suburban women who may otherwise stay away from Trump.
And Sophia, are you hearing anything about timing from the Trump campaign of this? You have the sentencing for Trump in New York on July 11th. Then the convention starts less than a week later in Milwaukee. I remember when Romney picks Ryan in 2012, they did it a few days in advance of the convention. I could see a Friday or Saturday morning rally with the announcement the days before the convention, make sure the Sunday shows are all focused on the pick, and then the convention begins Monday. Or are they actually thinking about rolling it out at the convention?
I think it may depend on what happens with the sentencing. It may be between the sentencing and the convention, but we do know that sometime next month, former President Trump will be very likely to announce who will be on the ticket with him.
What are we missing from the Veep stakes calculation? I mean, it's Trump's decision. We hear that ad nauseum.
Right.
But what are we missing?
That the vetting process is not really real, in the sense that, think about the traditional aspect of vetting. We want to go through your financial documents or your personal records to make sure there's nothing embarrassing. Trump's been convicted on 34 felonies. What are they worried? There's anything in the personal or financial background of any of these potential candidates.
No political advisor likes a surprise.
No, but there's nothing in there that they can't, that Trump doesn't believe they can't deal with, or that he's fundamentally worried about. This idea of the vetting thing is kind of just moving paper around to create the appearance of normality. It's going to come down to Trump's own gut instincts and his calculus about what he needs. The most important thing, I think, to consider is Trump thinks he's farther ahead than some of the campaign actually believe he is. They believe the swing states are closer than Trump thinks they are, and they wonder if that overconfidence could lead him in a direction for the running mate pick that might not be the most politically savvy.
And what's intriguing is that this pick will be announced after the CNN debate next week. we keep hearing from everybody, Trump's not preparing, it's informal, he's having policy discussions. Axios was reported on some of those. What's the real read on the debate inside the Trump camp from your sources?
They are preparing for it. They want to give up, the appearance of not preparing for it. Oh, Trump doesn't need to do a mock debate. And it sounds like they aren't doing a mock debate, but he's having very detailed policy discussions. One of the questions that I'm hearing that, Trump will have to figure out how to handle is the January 6th question, because no doubt it'll be one of the first topics to come up.
How's he going to handle it?
We don't know. I think when he's asked outright if the election was stolen or did Joe Biden win the election, he'll probably go about it in a very roundabout way and start talking about election integrity, which is something that his campaign has been very focused on. And it gives him a way to talk about, the quote unquote integrity of elections without straight up saying that the election was stolen.
And let me very, very quickly, an intervening factor, we may have a Supreme Court ruling on immunity, which may create a space about official acts, non-official acts, and Trump may just say, I was asking questions as President of the United States, which I'm fully authorized to do, and the Supreme Court has said that's part of my official duties. I'm golden. Won't be true, but I think that's going to be one of the places he's going to try to occupy.
All that to say there's a lifetime between now and the VP announcement, in politics at least. Sophia Kaya, Major Garrett, we really appreciate you coming by, sharing your reporting. Republican voters in Virginia's 5th congressional district don't know who won Tuesday's GOP primary, but CBS News has not yet called the race between State Senator John McGuire and House Freedom Caucus Chair Bob Good. McGuire currently leads by around 300 votes. He did declare victory last night, even though ballots are still being counted. Former President Donald Trump's endorsed Good's challenger, McGuire, after the congressman originally supported Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in the 2024 race. Good also voted to oust then Speaker Kevin McCarthy during that dust-up. And the battle for working voters across the board, that's heating up. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders heads to Ohio to generate support for a minimum wage hike in the state. Coming up next, we'll speak with him about unions, former President Trump, and the fight for the industrial Midwest. You're streaming America Decides. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders holding a rally in Ohio tomorrow. The independent lawmaker is seeking to bolster support for an upcoming ballot initiative to raise the state's minimum wage to $15 an hour. The current minimum wage in the Buckeye State for non-tipped employees is $10.45 an hour. For tipped workers, it's $5.25 an hour. All of this, these economic issues, they really are at the heart of the Biden-Trump race for the White House. And Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont joins us now from Capitol Hill. Senator Sanders, we always appreciate your time and you stopping by for a conversation. You're headed to Ohio to campaign about the minimum wage, about hiking it in that state. You've been all around the country on this issue. Do you believe it's breaking through, though, with working voters, that people like yourself, Democrats in Washington, those who are aligned with your values, are really working for working people and they're going to vote Democratic this fall?
Well, two things. First of all, the need to raise the minimum wage to a living wage is something that's catching on all over the country. To the best of my knowledge, every single state ballot item, and there have been over 10 that have called for raising the minimum wage, have won. I hope it wins in Ohio as well. Second, to answer your second question, look, I think what we are seeing in America today, and most workers understand it, is an economy in which the people on top, the wealthiest people, are doing phenomenally well. Never done better. We have more income and wealth inequality today in America than we've ever had, while at the same time 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And you got some 600,000 people sleeping out on the street. People can't afford housing. Healthcare system is broken, etc. So I think for policy reasons, for the right reasons, and for political reasons, what Democrats have got to say is we all got prepared to take on the greed of the pharmaceutical industry, of the oil companies, of the insurance companies. We're not going to give tax breaks to billionaires. Our job is to represent working families, not the very wealthy.
Senator Sanders, when you're in Ohio, you will be appearing at a United Auto Workers site. President Biden's been to many UAW places around the country, just as you have yourself. Sean Fain, the head of the UAW, has been a firm supporter of the Biden administration. Are you confident, though, Senator, that UAW workers and labor members nationwide are mobilized for the Biden ticket as this election heats up?
Well, first of all, the UAW under Sean Fain has been doing an extraordinary job. And they are tapping that nerve of ordinary Americans and saying, you know what, it's time for the working class of this country to get a break and not just see outrageous compensation packages for the CEOs or tax breaks for the very rich. So the UAW is doing a great job. But I think what we need to do is to expand the trade union movement, and we're working with Sean to do that, make it easier for workers to join unions. But I think at the end of the day, if the question is, do working people understand that under Biden, for the first time in American history, you had a president who actually walked a picket line with striking workers, as opposed to Donald Trump, whose main accomplishment in life was giving massive tax breaks to the very rich, while he appointed extraordinarily reactionary anti-union people to important positions in his administration. I think the choice is clear to workers.
Senator, what would you say to a labor union member, maybe in Ohio later today, and they say, I'm a traditional Democrat, or I've long voted for Democrats, but I like former President Trump's position on immigration and the border? Because that does seem to be a bit of appeal. As I'm on the campaign trail myself as a reporter, the immigration position seems to be drawing some of those workers along toward Trump. What would you say to that type of voter?
Well, what I would say is we have an immigration issue. We've got to deal with it. The Biden administration is attempting to deal with it. But at the end of the day, if you want to have an economy in which we have health care for all, when we're moving toward health care to all, when we take on the greed of the pharmaceutical industry, where your kids can get student debt relief, where we're addressing the crisis of climate change and creating good paying jobs as we do that. I'll give you just one example. In Ohio, Lordstown, Ohio. This was a plant that years ago workers there earned good wages. Plant was shut down. It was reopened. Wages were terrible. With President Biden's support and the good work of the UAW, that plant in Lordstown, they just finished a contract negotiation. Workers there are back to earning very, very good wages. So I would say to working people, look, you'll have differences with Biden on this or that issue. I have strong differences with the president on this or that issue. But at the end of the day, if you want to move working families forward, I think the choice is clear, and Biden is by far the preferable candidate.
You're also traveling to New York later this week, Senator Sanders. And when you're in Ohio, everywhere you go, I've always seen young people crowd around you. A lot of young Democrats, young voters nationwide have concerns about the ongoing war in Israel, concerns about what's going on with Gaza and the Palestinians there, the casualties that have been suffered. Is this an issue that remains a cloud over this entire country in this campaign, especially as young people and Democrats look at how they're going to vote later this year?
Bob, I think it does. I mean, I mentioned that I have disagreements with the Biden administration on this or that issue, and I have a big disagreement with them over what's going on in Israel. I think we all understand that Israel had the absolute right to defend itself against the horrific Hamas terrorist attack on October 7th. But what's going on now under the right-wing extremist Netanyahu government is a war not against Hamas, but the entire Palestinian people. I mean, the destruction there is unbelievable. 38,000 people dead, over 85,000 wounded, 60% are women, children, the elderly. Their civilian infrastructure, water systems, wastewater destroyed, education system destroyed, healthcare system destroyed. And right now, we are looking at a situation where tens of thousands of people face starvation. Thousands of kids there have already been diagnosed with malnutrition because Israel is blocking humanitarian aid. So I have strong disagreements with the president over this issue, and I think a lot of people in America do as well. So people support Israel's right to defend itself, but not to destroy the Palestinian people in Gaza.
Senator, I know you don't love talking politics, but politics does affect policy. If the administration doesn't change its position or adjust its position on Israel and Palestine in the coming few months, what could be the political cost? Do you believe some voters who might be inclined toward President Biden might just stay home even if they don't vote for former President Trump? How do you see it?
Yeah, I think that that's a real possibility, Bob. I mean, I think a lot of, people in the progressive community, young people, people of color, just Democrats in general, they're not going to vote for Donald Trump. They know what a reactionary he is, and they know how he's trying to divide our country and undermine American democracy. But at the same time, I think there are young people who are going to say, you know what, I just can't pull that lever for Biden. And our job is, A, to move Biden on this issue, to get changes in policy, to demand that before we give Netanyahu any more money, he undertakes a transformation of his policies toward the Palestinian people, West Bank, two-state solution, etc. But second of all, what we have to do is explain to young people that, look, you're concerned about climate change. Donald Trump thinks climate change is a hoax. Biden has put more money into transforming our energy system than any president in history. The choice is clear. You're concerned about women's rights. Biden has been very strong on the right of women to control their own body. Trump is proud that he appointed all these Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade. You're a worker. Biden was on the picket line. Trump appoints anti-union officials. So I think, notwithstanding the terrible war in Gaza, and I have very strong feelings. I've been, one of the leaders in the Senate in opposition to what the president is doing. Notwithstanding that, I think the choice is clear for the future of this country that Biden is far, far preferable to Trump.
Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, busy on the campaign trail as ever. Senator, thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Take care.
He exuded joy. It wasn't just that he was great. He was incredibly great.
He did exude joy. He was also one of the greatest baseball players of all time. Remembering the late Willie Mays, you're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Chicago is taking steps toward enacting a reparations program for black residents in the city. Mayor Brandon Johnson signed an executive order to establish a new group that will study policies in the city from the slavery era to present day. They will also hold public hearings and eventually make recommendations on restitution. Mayor Johnson said he is committing $500,000 to the project. And on this Juneteenth, we wanted to highlight an artifact that was recently unveiled at the Library of Congress. On display is the oldest African-American family tree. The Blackwell's kinfolk family tree was started by the late genealogist Thelma Doswell, who wanted to learn more about her history. Her and an artist created a canvas that's 8 feet tall and 6 feet wide. It consists of more than 1,500 names, reaching back to her first African-American ancestor in 1789. It includes one name you might have heard of, tennis legend Arthur Ashe.
There's a long drive way back in center field, way back, it is gone! Willie Mays just brought this crowd to its feet.
It's impossible to discuss baseball's greatest moments and not bring up Willie Mays' legendary 1954 World Series snag, famously known as the catch. The Giants legend known as the Say Hey Kid has now died at the age of 93. He certainly filled up baseball's record books, including 24 All-Star selections, 2 MVP awards, and 660 home runs. He also led the Giants to the World Series championship in 1954 and was a first-ballot Hall of Famer. In 2015, Mays was also awarded the highest civilian honor, the Medal of Freedom, by then-President Obama.
We have never seen an all-around five-tool player quite like Willie before, and we haven't seen one since. Willie also served our country, and his quiet example, while excelling on one of America's biggest stages, helped carry forward the banner of civil rights.
And President Biden released a statement this afternoon saying in part, quote, "We remember Willie Mays as part of the long line of black patriots who have helped us see a better version of ourselves as Americans and as a nation." That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.